Ritual, Power, Healing, and Community. Part 4. Sabotaging Ritual Space. Once, on one of my trips back home, I came upon one of the men of the village wandering in the bush. He looked bewildered, his hair disheveled and his manner suspicious. Because I knew him and his family, I stopped to talk to him. His language was erratic and incongruous. To my greeting, he responded only with his eyes fixed off in the distant wilderness. The road that leads to town must be inside one of these trees. I've been searching for many seasons. Can't seem to see it. Do you? I was disoriented. I asked him what road he was talking about. People think I have gone mad, he complained. It is the whole world that has gone mad. He began weeping and added, how horrible to be the only sane person in a world gone mad. I knew I could not continue talking with him. When back in the village, I asked what was wrong with him. A village acquaintance replied laughingly that he managed to steal the shrine of the ancestors with the intention of selling it to a group of white people. And he also spoke the unspeakable. Where he is the place that his actions naturally put him. I realized that, to the village, this person was no longer alive, no longer existed. No one was either sad or happy about him. He was not there. In the meantime, the outcast thought that he alone was sane. The realization of what was going on in this man's world made me very sad. It is important in ritual work to keep the content and purpose of the ritual space secret. Any attempt by any participant at disclosing the content of a ritual tears the group apart. To understand this, it is important to know that a ritual is a work of unification or oneness with the gods and with each other. To disclose the ritual is to tear open a space that must remain hermetically sealed. Breaking this seal creates a decompression that affects everybody, including the person responsible. In the traditional world, the person who violates the secret of a ritual becomes an outcast. The outcast is a person who has spoken the unspeakable or who shows the unshowable. What the outcast is doing is saying, I no longer want to exist among you. When this happens, there is no cure for him, hence the final departure. I say there is no cure, but actually it is because the cure would require the rest of the group to suspend its current relationship with the spirit world and descend to the lower region where the outcast resides in order to rise up slowly with him. No one wants to do that, and so the outcast never gets reinstated, even when he wishes to. The concept of all for one does not work in initiation societies. The principle of traditional groups is that its members are free individuals who enter the group freely. For a person to break the rule is not a sign of weakness or a momentary failure of the will. It is plain and irrevocable abdication or resignation from the group. A ritual must be done at this time to save the group from disintegrating as a result of this violent disconnection. To save an outcast, one must become an outcast. To become an outcast, one must lose one's power in the same fashion that the outcast lost his power. To lose power in that fashion means you never will have it back. Therefore, to try to save the outcast is to become an outcast yourself. The fundamental principle of ritual is that visibility threatens because visibility enslaves. When power comes out of its hiddenness, it shrinks the person that brought it into the open and turns that person into a servant. The only way that overt power can remain visible is by being fed. And he who knows how to make power visible ends up trapped into keeping that power visible. What I am suggesting here is that power, as it is displayed here in the West, is extremely stressful to those who must work to display it. Western culture derives its power from machines or machine-like processes that are part of a machine culture. This is a culture that gives names to corporations and treats these corporations like living beings. These machine beings display incredible power over workers and citizens in Western society. Whoever creates this kind of visible power is like the outcast I met in my own native village. Whoever creates this kind of power must then stay in the service to that which he creates. The visible display of power by the machine culture is similar to the unspeakable being spoken. It generates a force field inside of which one is enslaved. To display power is to become servile to it in a way that is extremely disempowering. This is because the service is fueled by the terror of losing the fantasy of having power. It is the king who is ruled by the kingdom. The man I met in the bush from my village was thinking that he alone was sane. In fact, he had the fantasy of sanity. Those serving the culture don't have the option to slow down and address the issue of what to do with their own needs or how to get in touch with their own unexpressed powers, for they are too caught up in the speed and motion that is required by the machine to feed its overt power. But some ultimately become so distraught that they figure out a way to take care of themselves, rather than to take care of something that can never be satisfied. I am suggesting that the machine culture, as described by David Kyle in his book, Human Robots and Holy Mechanics, is a violent breakaway from the realm of spirit, just as the speaking of the unspeakable was a violent breakaway from those of us who held ritual space and the unspeakable realm of the spirit as sacred. Ritual and community. Grandfather, why do you call me Brother Malidoma whenever you have something serious to say to me? There was a slight grin as he continued working with the herbs brought to him by my mother. He stored many herbs and medicines in his hut, which looked like an igloo made of mud. You are the reincarnation of someone in the family who was very dear to me, my brother Birifer. His is the name that is carried now by the entire family. So you are Birifer of the family Birifer. You were the elder son of my parents. You are my brother because, after the death of my brother, I was given the leadership of the family through the investiture ceremony. Your present father returned from the Gold Coast and took a wife, your mother. After your sister was born, I was told that my brother Birifer had been ordered to return to the family. It was an agreement between him and my father Saber, who was a great Babiro shaman priest and teacher of magic. A year later, your mother was heavy with child. When the baby inside her would speak to me, he would begin by calling me brother. So you see, it was you who began calling me brother. I knew it was Birifer about to be born again, and I knew he would be a boy child. I waited until you came to life at dawn, near the river between here and the white man's birthing place. I never wanted you to be born there. Besides, a man who is supposed to walk in a foreign land with foreign people must be birthed in the open air. Since then, it has been my turn to call you brother. Now do you understand? No, grandfather, I don't understand. I was still only around 5 when this was told me. Grandfather knew that I would understand later. I hear you call me Birifer. You do this as if you don't want to know that I am Malidoma. Why do you deny me my name? If I am Birifer, why do you call me Malidoma? And if I am Malidoma, why do father and the others, like the priest on the hill, call me Patrice? How come I have so many names? Which is my true name? Malidoma, brother, or Patrice? None of them is really your true name. But the one that comes the closest is the one that comes from the ancestors, the one that they address you by. It is Malidoma. Do you know why? Of course you don't. So I am going to tell you why, so it will look as though you asked me, okay? Yes, grandfather, tell me everything. I moved closer to him so I could catch every word and then hugged him. Patrice was bestowed on you by the white ones on the hill. Use it whenever you are in the world apart from the village. Brother is my name for you. Nobody else can use it but me. As for Birifer, well, no one is going to call you that. Malidoma is the name that you will begin hearing a lot when you become big, after you are initiated. So be ready to answer to it. You never know what name others will use. It is something that you will just have to learn to live with. That's enough for today. Naming has always been an interesting power. No matter what culture you look at, it can be used to denote ownership or friendship or love or bigotry. It can be used in common for the sake of instilling community or used in disparity to instill separation or preparation for war. And so I learned one more power from grandfather, that my names and those that would use them would tell me at what level of community I would be interacting. A community is a place of self-definition. Any group of people meeting with the intention of connecting to the power within is a community. People who regroup under a different banner to take care of themselves are attracted to indigenous culture. In these new formations, people seek to explore what has frustrated, betrayed, and constituted a deep wound in their hearts. What they are trying to do is restore their inner power, which has been tarnished, because they are trying to fight the servitude in which corporate power holds them prisoner. They are redefining themselves. They are moving themselves away from the magnetic visibility of externalized power. But to regroup against the machine is to get out of control. However, one must not only be aware of this moving away, one must also be prepared to go all the way. To leave behind society and culture, one has to be prepared to do battle in order to be who you want to be. Without a community, you cannot be yourself. The community is where we draw the strength needed to affect changes inside of us. Community is formed each time more than one person meets for a purpose. Development of community depends on what the people involved consent to. What one acknowledges in the formation of the community is the possibility of doing together what is impossible to do alone. This acknowledgement is also an objection against the isolation of individuals and individualism by a society in service of the machine. What we want is to create community that meets the intrinsic need of every individual. The individual can finally discover within the community something to relate to, because deep down inside each of us is a craving for an honoring of our individualism. The first group of Americans I worked with showed me how much they needed to exist as a community. We drummed breathlessly for 2 days, prayed together to the spirits, walked together in the wilderness, did exactly that which village people do almost all the time to keep themselves together as a community. The intensity of the participants, their veracity in absorbing every lesson, was a learning experience for me. An African generally feels that Americans are content and satisfied with all the privileges bestowed on them by their society. This first group experience turned my thinking around the other way. What I sensed these people wanted was a certain means to relate to each other, a means that has nothing to do with what shopping centers afforded them. Above all, I learned that the most primitive instinct still lives in the midst of the greatest sophistication. Suddenly, these people trusted each other enough to let go of their defenses. They trusted each other enough to want to be with each other in ways that no one taught them before. This is what I call the instinct of community. A true community does not need a police force. The very presence of a law enforcement system in a community is an indication that something is not working, and the presence of the police is supposed to make it work. Such a force is essentially repressive, which means that certain people in such a dysfunctional community do not know how to fit in. A community is a place where there is consensus, not where there is a crooked-looking onlooker with a gun, creating an atmosphere of unrest. In my village, houses do not have doors that can be locked. They have entrances. The absence of doors is not a sign of technological deprivation, but an indication of the state of mind the community is in. The open door symbolizes the open mind and open heart. Thus, a doorless home is home to anybody in the community. It translates the level at which the community operates. In addition, this community does not have a police force because it does not assume that the other person is dishonest or potentially evil. The trust factor must be high. Elders say that the real police in the village is spirit that sees everybody. To do wrong is to insult the spirit realm. Whoever does this is punished immediately by spirit, as in the case of a newlywed girl who stole grain from the granary of her father-in-law. She sold the mill of grains in the marketplace and then went into the bush to look for some dry wood to bring back on her way home. She found a dry tree and began to cut it down. It was not long before she cut herself deep in the arm. She arrived home bleeding and screaming. Her father-in-law rushed to the diviner. These kinds of accidents do not happen without a reason. The diviner revealed that his daughter-in-law was a thief who was purging her evil action. Because she transgressed the spirit, she had invited an accident. The diviner added that the wound would not stop bleeding until she publicly admitted to the theft. It brought shame to both the father-in-law and the daughter. Her pleading guilty stopped the bleeding and allowed the wound to be dressed properly. A functioning community does not need to peer at its members to make sure that they comply with the law. A functioning community is one that is its own protection, and one cannot form a community whose goal is to tear the rest of the society apart. A community that wants to correct the current sense of community is not going to survive. A true community begins in the hearts of the people involved. It is not a place of distraction, but a place of being. It is not a place where you reform, but a place you go home to. Finding a home is what people in community try and accomplish. In community, it is possible to restore a supportive presence for one another, rather than distrust of one another or competitiveness with one another. The others in community are the reason that one feels the way one feels. The elder cannot be an elder if there is no community to make him an elder. The young boy cannot feel secure if there is no elder whose silent presence gives him hope in life. The adult cannot be who he is unless there is a strong sense of presence of the other people around. This interdependency is what I call supportive presence. What is so good about being together with each other is that we can be the starting point for the possibility of building a larger community. Formation has to happen in a nurturing way if it is to work and prove itself to the rest of the world. In other words, it has to prove itself to be different, attractive, and nurturing without the ambition of competing with the current dysfunctional communities supported by an army of policemen. And for this to happen, ritual must be the principal ingredient of its operating dynamics. Ritual must be constantly invoked as an opportunity for the weak to become strong and the strong to get even stronger. The following is a partial list of the characteristics of a community based on what I have observed in my own village. 1. Unity of spirit. The community feels an indivisible sense of unity. Each member is like a cell in a body. The group needs the individual, and vice versa. 2. Trust. Everyone is moved to trust everyone else by principle. There is no sense of discrimination or elitism. This trust assumes that everyone is innately well-intentioned. 3. Openness. People are open to each other unreservedly. This means that individual problems quickly become community problems. Being open to each other depends upon trust. 4. Love and caring. What you have is for everybody. There is a sense of sharing, which diminishes the sense of egotistic behavior. To have while the others don't is an expression of your making up a society of your own. 5. Respect for the elders. They are the pillars in the collective memory of the community. They hold the wisdom that keeps the community together. They initiate the young ones, prescribe the rituals for various occasions, and monitor the dynamics of the community. 6. Respect for nature. Nature is the principal book out of which all wisdom is learned. It is the place where initiation happens. It is the place from where medicine comes. It nourishes the entire community. 7. Cult of the ancestors. The ancestors are not dead. They live in the spirits in the community. They are reborn into the trees, the mountains, the rivers, and the stones to guide and inspire the community. We need ritual because it is an expression of the fact that we recognize the difficulty of creating a different and special kind of community. A community that doesn't have a ritual cannot exist. A corporate community is not a community. It's a conglomeration of individuals in the service of an insatiable soulless entity. What we need is to be able to come together with a constantly increasing mindset of wanting to do the right thing, even though we know very well that we don't know how nor where to start. This seemingly frightening position is amusing to the spirit that watches over you. Your desire alone is strong enough to guide you along the path. But of course, it is useful to know certain elemental steps, such as invoking the spirit of the ancestors or of nature. Knowing what spirit to invoke and what to do with that spirit depends on your ability to stay focused on your purpose. You must be willing to speak of your inabilities, your clumsiness. As Robert Bly would say, you must walk your limp in order to stay with your purpose. This is important for you to truly shine, to really be at home with yourself in ritual and in community. Invocation is a call placed by a person to a spirit. To invoke the spirit is to call upon the invisible. The language of invocation must not be confused with order and command. It must be closer to a plea, a humble request. This is because ritual is a spirit-based activity performed by humans. For anything to happen, the ritual must be dominated by humility. We invoke spirits because we need their intervention in our affairs so that we can feel safe. Here is a typical invocation prior to a journey. I greet you, spirits of my ancestors. I greet you, spirit guides, friends of the invisible. You that see without looking, you that know without learning. I come to tell you that I am about to go on a journey. How can a blind man travel? My feet can't hold me. My eyes can't show me the way. My wit can't guide me through traps. So I come to give myself away to you, that you may be my feet, my eyes, and my wit, that I may see through you, that I may walk with you, that I may feel you. For it is with you that this journey can happen as a journey. May it be safe. This kind of invocation does not order the spirit to do something, but requests that the spirit intervene in the process so that it might be good. It does not ask for assurance. It deliberately wants to trust that the sincerity of the words will yield the desired intervention. Models of ritual and constraints of the modern world. During the months of July, August, and September, while mist still hung in the morning air, a different kind of ritual took place at grandfather's door. A line of people would show up waiting to receive grain, usually millet, that grandfather would give out freely. It was grandfather's daily task to distribute food to all these needy people. Grandfather, why do these people have no food? Why do we have so much? Grandfather graciously took a measure of millet from the woman whose job it was to measure the correct amount and proudly gave it to whoever was waiting next in line. He waited until the receiver was out of earshot. Brother Malidoma, we listen with the spirit realm. At night, I look into my bowl of sky water rainwater that has been collected before it ever touches the ground while everyone else sleeps. If any animal harms or ravages our millet or nut crops, I warn it away by shooting my upside-down arrow. If it persists, then I send another arrow to stop it from ever harming our crops again. I had heard about the secret of the upside-down arrow before. Grandfather was well known for having this power, especially during the war against the white man that was never won. He commanded great respect with this power. As another person in need approached, I whispered, "Why don't these people shoot the upside-down arrow themselves?" The upside-down arrow was a kind of supernatural arrow that certain Babiro shaman priests could send to kill man or beast. It was kept secret except to those who were worthy of its knowledge. Grandfather graciously extended another measure of millet. Because they do not yet have ears that hear, nor eyes that see what cannot be seen and cannot be heard. "Oh," I said rather matter-of-factly, not having the slightest idea what grandfather meant. At about noon, when the sun was hot and grandfather was tired of his duty, he would wake me. Brother Malidoma, my legs can't hold you any longer. Please allow them rest. I would wake up, half dazed with sleep, and wonder what had happened. The rite of charity being over, grandfather would bring out food, and we would eat together. Grandfather was very frugal. Food was not to be taken unless one was hungry. If grandfather saw any of the children eating unnecessarily, he would bluster. When you come of age, you will find initiation a bitter experience. Do not let the desires of physical satisfaction temper your warriorship. Remember, our ancestors are spirits. They feed their minds, and that is why they can do things beyond our comprehension. Food was given a strange priority in the Birifer house. One ate only when absolutely necessary. Grandfather felt the same way about sleep. Sleep is tribute too often paid to the body. The body is but a garment we give far too much attention to. Leave your body alone, and it will align itself to the needs of the spirit that you are. Frugality was a way of life around grandfather, but others did not learn this lesson. Our keeper of the gate was known throughout Africa and parts of Europe as a man deeply connected with dimensional beings. People came from all over the world to meet him and to be healed by the spirits through the gate he was in charge of. Europeans, whose needs were met, gave him lots of money. Error number one, he took it. Soon, he started charging them money for his services. Error number two. In the end, only foreigners went to him. Village people, knowing that he had transgressed the law of the spirit world, would go somewhere else for their healing needs. Eventually, the spirit world abandoned him. He could not open the gate anymore, nor could he effectively heal anyone. That was the end of his medicine man career. There are a lot of crooked people out there who sip the juice out of innocent people. One has to develop the smell that can detect the good from the crooked, the honest from the dishonest. For example, in the indigenous world where rapid changes are occurring nowadays, people have had to update their trust because money has intruded into everything, especially the spiritual. Would-be healers, and sometimes true healers, medicine men and shamans, have slipped away enveloped by the huge wave of money, making people aware that, in fact, they have lost their power to strangers who want to buy them off. If indigenous people can tell the crooked from the honest person, it is because they live in the same community. In the West, people live in the illusion of a community and thus are unable to tell the difference between a real medicine man and a peddler. Their confusion is deepened by the intense craving for transcendence, born and raised in a sort of isolation. No elders, no spiritual context in which to grow. They grow to become all needy. And so the first person that appears to have the kind of stuff they need is followed without reserve. Modern cultures cannot, in their pursuit of the spirit, expect to reproduce the original indigenous way of existing. The modern world vibrates in such a way that it is impossible to translate or transplant. Anything aboriginal that enters the artificial space of Western culture is diminished, changed to fit into it. That which is indigenous can only live in a land that is indigenous. So in some ways, the shaman downtown is not the same as the baburo in the village, because downtown does not emit the same energy as the village circle. But this does not mean that the modern-day healer is ineffective. It means that his status is commensurate with the situation in which he is supposed to work. And in this case, everything he asks, as long as it is done with respect, honesty, and integrity, cannot be looked at as a parody of spiritualism. Money and spirit. Can money and spirit be friends when ritual is involved? That is the critical question for indigenous people. It is my understanding that the pure sense of spiritual sharing should be devoid of financial intrusion. There is a kind of divinity in the dollar bill that is different from the divinity in traditional spirituality. The question I want to raise is whether these two opposing or competing divinities do influence each other as they become intertwined. Opposites that meet certainly influence each other in ways that are sometimes catastrophic. And I know too, by experience, that opposites must follow each other because they need each other to maintain a proper balance. Consequently, there cannot be a giver who does not receive. There cannot be a receiver who does not give. When we don't have these opposites paired, it voids the action because it lacks completion. I am talking about a kind of interchange that is equitable, that reminds both parties that something successfully happened and should serve as an example for others in the future. In the indigenous world, when a diviner prescribes a ritual to be done in order to stop something from becoming bad, he expects you to come back with an expression of gratitude when everything is completed. This is not a payment for the work done. It is more like a symbol representing the circumstances that led to your interaction with this specific diviner. Later on, someone else encountering the same situation will come to the same diviner, and the previous story will have been an illustration of what that other person is now going through. Western culture is too comfortable with itself to change overnight. To think about changing this society is to evade the task we have toward helping ourselves as a people. It is more realistic to think about the spiritual needs of family and self as a starting point for social transformation than to begin thinking we can change Hollywood. The magnet of materialism is keeping people too busy to hear about spiritual change. In addition, the power of the machine causes people not to hear what we have to say. The machine is influencing a greater part of our lives than we think. To make self each person's own best spiritual project is to avoid the crush of the gigantic modern machine. Ritual enables us to live a life that is much closer to what our souls aspire to. Industrial cultures live with the essence of two extremely dangerous phenomena. One is the good side of production. The other is the danger of what happens to the tools for production when they are devoid of any spiritual strength. Technology can and is supposed to be attentive to what liberates the person toward taking care of the higher level of existence. But to me, the role of technology must be to attend to the lower part of human existence, since a thing devoid of the spiritual cannot help reach out to the spirit. The spirit liberates the person to work with the things of the soul. Because this reaching out to the spiritual is not happening, the machine has overthrown the spirit and, as it sits in its place, is being worshipped as spiritual. This is simply an error of human judgment. Anyone who worships his own creation, something of his own making, is someone in a state of confusion. Please stay tuned for part 5. Peace, blessings, and much love to you all. On Earth, there was once a people who held the knowledge of the universe across space and time. They were the Israelites. Over time, their wisdom was scattered among all nations, with each taking a piece. In the end, this left them destitute. Now, listen to this profound wisdom passed down through great works, presented in your voice, from your own perspective, from the perspective of the Israelites themselves. For early access to chapters and full audiobooks, consider becoming a member. For just $10 per month, you can unlock exclusive access to this priceless wisdom, once stolen from our ancestors. Hear their voices through your own as you join us on this journey of discovery and reclamation.